record. And welcome to another episode of the New Generation Challenge podcast. My name is Brett Parnell, one of your co-hosts.
And I'm Titi Fernandez, your other co-host.
And we are finally back on schedule talking about the most recent episode of the Challenge 40 Battle of the Eras. This was quite the episode, wasn't it, Titi?
Yeah, and before we start talking about the episode, I do want to briefly touch on the fact that I'm sure most of us have heard, that Derek and Horacio actually went on a Zoom call with production to talk about the elimination, and it showed that Derek not only won fair and square because they both received the same, sorry about my dog, but they both received the same instructions that said that you didn't have to have the pegs on the wall before you call check. And also they calculated even if Horacio didn't pick up his own pegs and Derek, or if he didn't pick up his own pegs and also accounted for the time that his ball got stuck, Derek would have still beat him by 1 second. So
Okay.
I did want to touch on that
Yeah.
because I know there was a lot of controversy going over it, and I'm really happy that production did do that. And I do wish that in the future, instead of like doing it separately, for them to just mention, and I'm sure even if they would have mentioned in the episode, like Derek won, he had all the pegs in the board, people would have still said that wasn't the rules. But I'm just glad that they showed the footage of both of them hearing the same instructions and getting the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I missed that before we came on, but I'm glad it happened. And that now, considering that I'm sure if they did that, they both have all the information they need, that's what's really important. And hopefully that leaves Horacio to have a better impression of the challenge moving forward.
Yeah, and because he posted on his story and said, am I still skeptical? Yes. But honestly, I feel like at this point, there's no arguing that Derek won fair and square. And if he doesn't think that that was fair, then that's not anybody else's problem other than his.
Exactly.
But yeah, any initial thoughts that you had just based off the episode?
Initial thoughts that I had, I think this is where we're going to start to see this season pick up, not only with all the drama that went on, and I'm sure we'll get into that, but we've been, even just from the first few minutes, we've been seeing snippets of Olivia and Theo and Michelle and Devin together, and now we know that both of those pairs have moved from being an alliance into being a couple. Then we get into the challenge, which certainly had a lot to talk about. Quite an interesting team dynamics going on here. And then we see everything once heat up again between the same two usual suspects, as that pretty much most seasons they're on together. And then we get into an elimination where I really like that they put this in. I know some people might be a little controversial about it, but I thought it was great to see something that get competed in that was very equal amongst really anyone who got thrown in, and it led to some unpredictable results.
Yeah, and again, like I do love the equalizer eliminations because it shows a more broad set of like skills, and it just shows that who can actually be good at doing certain things that you normally wouldn't practice at home. Like obviously we're not digging or putting nails in a wall trying to get them out with a hammer at home.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did like the elimination because it was different. I guess it was a little bit janky, but I personally enjoyed it. But we'll talk about more of that later. Do you want to start like right after the elimination and what we saw there?
Right after the last elimination.
Yeah. So, because I just wrote down a few notes. We
Go
had
ahead.
Derek and Jenny walking in, skipping around because they just won. And then we get a cut to a scene of Era 4 having kind of a team meeting. And we see Olivia calling out Josh for saying that he
that's right.
wanted to nominate himself, but then said, like, when push came to shove, he did not volunteer himself.
I missed that in my notes, so I'm glad you brought it up. I think I was in the middle of eating for the first couple minutes of the episode. But no, that's a great point, especially where now we're gonna start. I'm glad that Olivia made that point because now we're gonna start to see, um, at least amongst the forward, I'm sure the whole house probably got some information about what went on and could overhear things. We're probably going to start to see people recognize that no, you can't just back out at the last minute. Either we're going to play a game that at least that we try to have every the targets moved around equally amongst the players, or we're not. But at the same time, as I'm sure we'll get to at the end of this episode, my prediction last week for the targets on Era 4 was totally wrong because the person who wins the elimination had their own mind, and I have a theory on why that might be.
Yeah, and I also think it's worth to mention that if you nominate yourself, if you say, I'm going to do it like for the team, you have a 50% chance of going into the next elimination.
Yeah,
And I think we saw like um after the new targets are picked, Michelle is the only person that is left in the house that has never been nominated for elimination.
that's right.
So I think that it's a very
And it
like if it
does help her to a point that she is one of the ones who won the first challenge, so didn't
oh
have
yeah.
to risk
Yeah,
that.
yeah. But I do think it's important because if I was there and I have a 50, like if I nominate myself, I have a 50% chance of going into elimination, 25% chance of going home theoretically. I'm not going to nominate myself. I'm just going to let the other people choose whoever they want. And if they choose me, then they choose me. But cuz even in era 4, they're not saying, "Hey, we're going to take turns nominating ourselves." Like because we've seen Olivia be nominated and we've seen Kylan be nominated like every single time. So it's not like they have some sort of agreement saying we're all gonna volunteer ourselves.
Yeah,
Because so the only thing I have a problem with is Josh basically saying, I'm gonna do it,
saying he'll
and
do
then
it,
not do it.
and then he doesn't want to go up against CT.
Hmm.
That's pretty much all I can take from why Josh did that.
Yeah. But we saw a little bit of a pool party
Yeah,
going on, and we saw I think some foreshadowing because we saw Cara and Laurel playing ping pong or
yeah.
something like that, just kind of laughing, and then later in the episode we obviously see how things escalated.
Shout out to
But
Aviv. I think they were. I brought this up because I just loved it dating back to my trip in 2015. I think they were playing Matt Call, the Israeli beach game.
oh really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Aviv brought a game that she's used to in her culture into the house, which I found really cool to see. With Israel being one of my favorite places I've ever visited.
Yeah, I really like that too. I didn't notice that. But do you have any more thoughts? I guess um we had Nehemiah and Devin, or Nehemiah kind of approach Devin and Tori
Yeah,
with trying to make some sort of deal. So what did you think about that?
yeah, that was interesting. I think it's good, especially with two players that are in such a big power position as Devin and Tori are on every season to try to do something with them together. Not only because if it works out, like I was just saying, that they're in always in a good position, it seems, but also you don't want to approach Devin without Tori or Tori without Devin, or you don't
Mhm.
have the proper dynamic needed in order to make that agreement move forward in the game.
Yeah, I definitely think that. And also, we had a pretty big segment about the Vacation Alliance right before the challenge. So I don't know. I thought it was kind of funny that like Josh was saying, they're just jealous that they don't go on vacations with each other. And then they're saying we went on one vacation and
Yeah,
whatever.
I
So
thought
I
it
don't
was
know.
interesting with that scene, notably because they were like Casey and Josh and Tori were kind of calling it the Vacation Alliance, it seemed. But
Hmm.
was it more just an Era 3 and Era 4 alliance? Because we saw Michelle there, we saw John A there, we saw Olivia there, who wasn't even on the challenge when the Vacation Alliance went on vacation that one time.
Honestly, because we did hear Michelle say that she is not in the Vacation Alliance. So I think it's more of the Vacation Alliance is kind of the core, and then they have like the next layer is more of the Era 3 and Era 4. So I
Yeah,
guess the next layer would be somebody like Michelle and I guess you would have like Jordan and Johnny and that, but they're also very well
Yeah.
connected with those players. But I definitely think the third layer of that would just be era 4 with era 3 together.
I'm just
And
going to
that's
make a prediction here, though, and this could even go into 41 and 42. It could be a while. We don't quite know. But if they're not going to cast that entire group that went on vacation together, then especially with Michelle now in a relationship with Devin, it is so easy for her to replace, say, a Fessy in that alliance.
oh, absolutely. And I think that
Because they're going to need more numbers if they don't get their entire group on a season together, which I think after they basically ran Spice Lies Allies and then Ryder Dies 9 months later,
mhm.
casting will probably try to break them up a bit, just a guess.
Yeah, and I think even like let's say like I think Devin and Tori are each other's number ones for male and females, but I think you could say that Jordan is Tori's number 2 guy, you
Yeah,
know? And then you can say that in this season at least Michelle is Devin's number 2 girl.
yeah,
So we have like I think that even if they're not in the technical vacation OG vacation alliance, they're always going to be in that like second layer, I guess, the tighter knit group of those people, like
exactly.
somebody like a Michelle, like a Jordan, and Bananas too, because we didn't see them taking shots at him during Ride or Dies either,
No, not at all.
or in World Championships. So I don't know. I thought it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, so did I.
Um, do you have anything else before we talk about the daily?
Not really. Daily was, if we want to go there, quite a interesting challenge because it really required both. I like this daily in that they had both like a big strength and endurance portion at the start, but then that we also saw it come down to whoever was able to do what was effectively a puzzle, even though it was a balancing competition, and not just automatically make whichever team is the strongest just run with it.
Yeah, I didn't think of it like more like that. I guess I was also just kind of waiting for after the daily when we were gonna see the segment of the big drama. But I don't know. I thought it was interesting that we see Emily kind of be confused after the first part, and it's like she thinks that her team is gassing out, but in reality, Laurel basically says Emily's competition to me. I don't want her here. And we see that Laurel through the daily challenge to make sure that they didn't win and that Emily was not in elimination.
Yeah, which is I find really interesting because only, at least in my perspective, because you don't know what these errors are going to mean by the end of the show at all. Only Laurel would be a player who would be trying to get rid of somebody from her own team as good as Emily Schromm is.
But I think that
And it's,
based off of
sorry, go ahead.
what sorry, the first day when TJ was explaining the prizes, he did say the first like the first or first place is in man and woman, you know?
Yeah,
So I think that that makes them assume that it's she she knows she is going to have to compete with Emily, whether if it's a final where there's one male and one female from each era, or if it's just like the people that are left over, if it goes to an individual portion. So I think she was thinking ahead of saying either I'm going to have to face her before the final or I'm going to have to face her during the final. And
true.
she sees Emily as a threat. You know, Emily had never lost an elimination prior to this elimination. So I would be scared of seeing Emily in a final.
Oh yeah, no question. Um, the one interesting thing I thought of because I came back to like I know when you and I and when a lot of other people talked about the cast online way back when, everyone's kind of general consensus amongst really the whole podcasting community and the whole fan base was Era 2 has the strongest female team. And they do,
Absolutely.
but they seem to have such big personalities on the female team that they are just specifically Emily, Laurel, and Cara. seem to all be trying to take each other out as opposed to trying to move forward right to the end of the game.
Yeah, and I
Which,
think
I mean, bodes
it's
well if you're Aviv, because she's
they're coming
sitting
after
there
each other. Yeah.
knowing that I've only been on one season and don't have a rivalry with any of them.
Yeah, and I honestly think it was more Laurel, and I think Laurel's voice is very loud and very strong, like the things that she says. Because again, she threw the first shot by putting Kara into the first elimination, and I think what it was is that Emily and Bananas are very close. And
Yep.
Emily, my guess is that Bananas' number one female was Emily
Mhm.
and Laurel was number 2. So I think it wasn't just getting a strong competitor out. I think she wanted to be Banana's number 1 and not have Emily there.
That makes sense.
But yeah, it was pretty interesting. And then other than that, we see Era 1 is a disaster, like always. And we see Era 4 take the win on that. So I was really happy to see them do that. We saw Michelle and Kylan doing the balancing of the sandbags, and then they ended up winning it.
Yeah, absolutely. I was excited about that too. You and I know, for challenge fans who haven't got to see it, just how good Michelle is at puzzles in Survivor. And so this was a perfect role for her to secure that win.
Yeah, and I mean, we've also seen her be really good at the puzzles on the challenge too,
Yeah,
because I mean, we saw her beat Cara Maria in a
yeah.
puzzle elimination, which,
And the mini final in
yep,
last season.
absolutely, yeah. But do you have anything else from the daily?
Um, no, just that, like we said, we see Era 4 win, and then last place, like you talked about, being Era 1. So that means that we're going to see CT and
Tina.
Tina, yeah, automatically in elimination. So I guess that's my final kind of wrap up thought on this on the daily is this is one of the earliest times we've seen CT go into elimination, other than when he put himself in to try to take
Mm-hmm.
out Jay and it backfired.
Yeah, and I personally like Josh, I as soon as CT was nominated, I would be terrified to go in
Yeah,
against him because he is the GOAT, he is the greatest male challenger and there's really nothing that he is bad at,
right.
but definitely something intimidating and also Tina going in, which we saw Tina has been doing really good, I think, in the
She has.
challenges.
I
I
didn't
think
know anything about Tina's game coming in, but she, other than what we saw in All Stars briefly, which I mean,
mhm.
for lack of a better terms, is a different show.
Mhm.
And um, what I've seen so far from her on a main show, she's been very impressive within that era that seems to be struggling.
Yeah, absolutely. I think she's definitely one of the stronger females and I mean, I guess
Her and
we only
Rachel
have
left.
Rachel, yeah. Well, obviously Rachel's very strong, but I
Yeah,
think she definitely came in shape and she is ready to play. She's not a slouch and she's somebody that wants to be there and wants to compete and wants to go to the end. So I think Tina is also somebody that you can't um underestimate going into an elimination.
absolutely.
But we see um the right after the daily, it was a short clip of CT and Tina just basically saying we don't have a preference whether or not we want to go against Era 3 or Era 2. Like they're both strong players, they have friends on both teams. So they didn't really care which era went in.
I found that part really interesting because that was the thought is right after the shock of OCTs going in,
Mhm.
you realize that you're like, wait a minute, this means either Nehemiah's going in along with Emily. Emily has never lost an elimination at that point,
Mhm.
or Tori and Devin are going in. So at that point, you're looking at going, wait a minute, either CT, Emily, or Tori or Devin are going home tonight. There's no way around it.
Yeah, and I think other than I don't think Tina is a champ. I could be incorrect. But everybody else is a champion, you
Yeah.
know? So, I mean, I'm gonna fact check that
And I
super quick.
think that's just going to be probably start now that we've got rid of some players already. That's probably how this season is going to move forward. That kind of like we saw in Survivor Winners at War, which I referenced quite a bit coming
Mhm.
into the challenge world as a Michelle Fitzgerald fan. Um, I think we're going to get to that point where we just start to see legends of this game go week after week after week after week. And there's really no way to
Yeah.
avoid it with these 30 players.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times some of the older school players are in more of a like they're more they're more feared, I guess, because
Yep.
same thing with Survivor Winners at War is when you see people like Boston Rob and Parvati and like if we're seeing somebody like a CT, they are very feared people and I think if like they are able to take a shot at them, they're going to try to do that. But the difficult part is if you miss, then you're going to have an angry CT
It's a
coming
lot
in.
easier to miss in this show
Oh yeah, because yeah, absolutely.
because no
But
matter who you vote in, you get a chance to come back.
yeah, it's not like a vote in, you're done type of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, you got any more thoughts on that?
I don't think so.
Should we just move on to the deliberation?
Yep.
All right. So we see Olivia and Kyland coming in because they were the winners and they were the targets. And we see like first of all, Olivia just says, I've been hearing a lot of rumors. And then we kind of cut to Nehemiah saying stuff about the Vacation Alliance.
Yeah. Something I just forgot of earlier, but just to bring up now because it kind of
hmm
ties in. I just loved Olivia's attitude to the game now of in this point where right after Era 4 wins, it went from I was nervous when Josh didn't keep his end of the deal, but now I'm in a position that I have a lot of power in this game. As
hmm
opposed to say some of other players that we've seen be so nervous about using their ability to name targets.
Yeah. And I I think Olivia has
Oh, sorry, not to
done
name
a lot of
targets, to um choose who goes in.
I think she's done a lot of growth and like from everything that she went through, like all the hate from the
Yeah.
last season. And I think she really came into this season in a good place in her mind that she's okay with the fact that if she's nominated, she might go into elimination,
Yeah.
but then she is going to step up to it and step up to the power if she wins like she did.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, n- well, I guess it was before the season too, but I went to a couple events that I was met Olivia both before the season and right after the season, and
Mhm.
she seems to have. The one before the season, we didn't know everything that happened at the end. It was the premiere of that season, but like she was in such a positive headspace of the show, despite everything we saw in 39 after 40 in
Yeah.
at Challenge Mania in Georgia. So I'm sure that she's like we saw has got over that with Nerys and with Horacio and is definitely embracing the game to the fullest.
Yeah, and I think it is probably going to be a lot easier for her now that they are both out of the house, even though they're friends again or whatever. But I feel like she kind of felt like she owed Nerys and Horacio a lot.
Yeah,
And I think now she can kind of play her own game without having to make up for something that she did or whatever, you
completely
know?
agree. Especially when she could have been in that tricky spot again, where if she feels that she owes Nerys and Horacio something, but
hmm
comes in with two extremely tight allies in Michelle and Derek Chavez,
Yeah.
it could have
And
been very tricky for her to navigate certain deliberations down the road, and now she doesn't have to worry about it.
And she's also really tight with Jordan
Yep.
because she's really good friends with she is a very well connected player and I think you could say that Nerys and Horacio are not as well connected as her. So I feel like them being there longer would almost hold her back from being able to make new alliances and make different moves that aren't just based off of what she thinks that Nerys and Horacio want, because she feels like, because she's proving to them that she's sorry and she wants to make it better, if that
True.
makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I've said this before, I think, on this podcast about Michelle, and I'll say the same thing about Olivia, but it doesn't surprise me that she's able to be that well connected
Mhm.
because both Michelle and Olivia are two of the nicest people that I've ever met in real life. So
Mhm.
if you have that just natural aura to you, you're going to be able to become well connected in the house after a couple seasons, even if it's rough as a rookie.
Yeah, and I definitely think, like you said, both of those girls definitely have it in them to be well connected and well rounded.
All right, so moving back to deliberations.
Mhm.
Yeah, you were right about um Olivia and Nehemiah.
Yeah, and another thing I want to mention is that once Nehemiah kind of says, because Nehemiah tried to make a deal with Devin and Tori, like we talked about earlier, and then Devin and Tori said, I can't promise you that.
Yeah,
And then now we see Nehemiah saying, bringing up the vacation alliance, and then Devin basically shutting him out and calling him out, saying, you were like, weren't you the one that was trying to make a deal with me earlier?
yeah. Which is smart of Devin to do as well because he needs to avoid elimination against CT.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But I do think that Devin and Tori, was it? Yeah, Devin and Tori kind of both knew that they were going to be safe,
Yeah,
because it just goes
it
back
seemed that
to
way.
the, like,
There's
again,
so
the,
many. Everyone on Era 4 is connected to Devin and Tori in one way or another.
yeah,
And
and even,
if you're looking at like we have Olivia and Kyland making that decision, Olivia is not putting in Michelle's boyfriend at this point in time.
yeah, and I think that even Olivia is, she's gonna pick Devin over somebody like Nehemiah,
Yeah,
because she doesn't know, she's done seasons with Devin. She's hung out with Devin. She is
yeah,
best friends with Devin's girlfriend. She's not gonna pick him. Tori and Olivia and Tori and Michelle, they are all friends. So I
exactly.
think I think it was just, everybody knew that Era 4 was not gonna take a shot at Era 3 in the Vacation Alliance. So, yeah.
All right. So moving on, we cut to commercial and
Mhm.
then come back to what starts out as a discussion amongst Era 3 and 4, but I think it's mostly just joking around within that group. But then we
Mhm.
quickly see a discussion that turns much larger between Michelle and Laurel. What are your thoughts here? And
Well,
I
I
know,
do.
I don't know if you saw. I think it was like it might have been copied and posted to
Mhm.
Facebook or something. But Cara Maria went on a very good description, at least from her perspective, on what went on here on TikTok. I don't use TikTok whatsoever, but I was able to find someone share it to a Facebook group.
Yeah, I do wanna talk about that a little bit later on. I wanna first touch on, um, like, the Laurel and Michelle argument, because I did watch Michelle, she went on live
Ryan, I was in there
with
too.
Ryan, and she basically gave more context to the situation that happened. She mentioned that the day prior, Laurel said to her, I will never be your friend. And
Yep.
then Michelle kind of walked away from that conversation. And then Michelle was working out or going to work out or something like that. And Laurel was waiting for her and saying, I wanted to tell you, like, why I will never be your friend. And Michelle mentioned that she was talking about Ride or Dies and Fessy, or just a bunch of random stuff. But I think the narrative that's out there, and I'm really glad that she went on live to say that, because the narrative that's out there right now is that Michelle is just kind of begging to be Laurel's friend and chasing her around the house trying to be her friend, and obviously that's not the case right
Yeah,
now,
not at all.
and I think
Laurel just seems like she's in the position of going, I can drag this out for every ounce of airtime possible, at least from
yeah.
my perspective. I mean, one, I don't know why you would need to have a discussion with somebody on why you don't want to be friends with them. Just don't be friends with them if that's the case. I mean, Michelle is a grown, mature woman. She doesn't need that sort of attention from Loyal when they've with their past.
Mhm.
Um, it kind of reminds me of like going all the way back to student elections when I was in university, and one
Mhm.
guy running decided to approach me in the hall, asked me to vote for him. I said, "Hey, sorry, I already voted for your opponent," and he said, "Do you mind if I tell you why you're wrong?" And he talked to me for a half an hour about why I voted incorrectly, and he lost by like 10 votes.
Yeah, and
He
that's
could have
a
found 10 people to vote for him in that half an hour very easily.
and it's like what's said and done is said and done, you know? There
Exactly.
is no going back there and revoting.
And also, I mean, my also thought in this situation is Loyal. I don't know why she keeps bringing up Ryder dies. Yes, we get it. Jay threw you and Jack in. I know she's going to blame Michelle. I don't see that even being the case, but that's her opinion. But you have to throw people in Ryder dies when you win the daily.
Yeah, and they had
That's
to
just kind
nominate
of the game.
half of the house. You know,
Literally.
it's not like she nitpicked her and Jack out of
Yeah,
everybody, you know? But I think that the ride or dies argument is just like beating a dead horse.
it
You
is.
know, we've already settled why she did that. She said, "You were cold to me and that's why I did that." And Laurel is still saying, "You voted me in, you put me into elimination, blah, blah, blah." And I think that that conversation is just honestly like not relevant anymore. And we can even see a clip when Laurel says, "Well, that's why I wanted to talk to you, or that's why I wanted to tell you that." Just also reiterating the fact that Laurel was the one who was seeking this conversation.
Yeah,
She was the one who started this argument. It did not need to happen.
no.
And it I don't know. But we see that Kara is just kind of listening in a little bit, and then when she hears that Michelle is she kind of realizes that Michelle is acting a lot like is kind of the way that she has been. And
Yeah,
it's almost like now that Kara isn't taking Laurel's shit anymore, Laurel is trying to find like a new punching bag.
yeah.
And Kara steps
And
in.
according to Kara on TikTok,
Mhm.
Tina said, I'm overseeing conversations between Michelle and Loyal that remind me of being on a season with the two of you back in the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah, and it like or she steps in and says, "Michelle, I will be your friend." And that honestly made me very happy because
Yeah,
obviously Michelle's my favorite challenger, but Cara is also one of my favorites, and seeing her kind of be like a big sister and take Michelle in and say, "You know what? Like me and you are very similar. We've experienced a lot of the same things. I will take you in and I will be your friend." So, yeah, do you have any more thoughts about that segment of it?
yeah, I really like that from Kara. Like you say, I did have something that just popped in my mind and now it kind of popped out. I'm gonna see if it comes to me quickly.
Oh, you're fine. After that, we did see Cara starting to dye her hair and talk to Emily, and this was before the Cara Laurel confrontation, but this was when Laurel said that Cara's doing this on purpose. Well, duh, I would do the same thing. You are
Yeah,
coming after me, so why wouldn't I try to get somebody on my side? But we see Cara saying that again, that she is trying to make Michelle the new person that she's gonna bully and try to constantly put down and belittle. And then this is when Cara tells Emily that Laurel threw the daily challenge too.
yeah.
But yeah, do you have any more
I
thoughts until we
remember. what I was
Oh, you
about
do?
to say
Okay, good.
now. Yeah, I was just gonna say too briefly that we, how do I, now it slipped out again.
Oh, that's
Days
funny.
after work. Oh well,
All
it
right. Do
must
you
not be
wanna?
that important.
So then after that, we see, um, it kind of cuts to the kitchen scene where we have Laurel yelling at Cara and Cara saying,
Oh,
"I
can I
don't
just
back." Oh,
can I
yeah.
just
So
quickly interrupt
go
now
ahead.
because it's back in my mind?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say briefly that like we see Loyal still on this ride or dies issue with Michelle.
Mm-hmm.
There's been, as we know, a lot of seasons in between there. We've seen them
Mm-hmm.
have a brief interaction in Battle for a New Champion when Loyal came in as a mercenary. We've seen Loyal do All Stars 4 with Kara and everything that went on there. We've also seen things outside the game. And I'm just starting to wonder as this gets bigger and bigger and bigger on, is Loyal really in the right mental space to be playing this game after what happened with Nicole?
See, my viewpoint
She
of
had to
this.
be there because she was, I mean, it's 40,
Mm-hmm.
and she's one of the most influential players in the game, but I don't know based on the timing of this if it was a great time for her to be on television.
I honestly agree with you, and I think it's not just the Nicole thing. I think she has some things that she should probably work on by herself,
Yeah,
because the way that we have seen her treat people, not just Cara, not just Michelle, but other castmates, is very degrading, very hateful, and I I don't know, and it's like I think I don't know if it gets over her head that she feels like she's an alpha or whatever, can't be beaten, but that's never an excuse to do like throw personal digs at somebody,
exactly.
because there's a difference between shit talking in a game and just being a competitor, but there's a difference. It's a whole nother subject to be personally attacking people,
Yeah,
which I don't know if it was the Nicole thing, but I think it's not even just that. I think it's more a deeper level now.
I agree.
But um we see that Kara kind of calls out Laurel when Laurel is yelling at her, and she says, "Laurel, you are doing this to Emily, you're doing this to me, you're Michelle." And she says, "Did you ever think about the fact that maybe you're the problem?" And Laurel is saying the thing about when you point a finger at somebody, you have three pointing back at yourself, as she is pointing fingers at Cara, which I thought that was kind of weird, because if she's already shit talking about pointing fingers, and then she's literally doing the same thing to Cara, it's kind
Literally.
of getting up in her face. And we even see Michelle try to like tell her to back up and try to de escalate the situation. But yeah,
And then eventually we see security have to do the same thing. For
yeah,
I'm sitting there going like, wait, this is like the first time I've seen security on camera since Josh and Fessy years ago.
yeah. And they're not even just like they are pushing Laurel back.
Yeah.
I rewinded that scene a couple times because I was like, I thought it was a cast member at first, but then I see that there's this guy that's literally pushing Cara or
Funny
Laurel away
enough, I
from
thought it was
Cara.
a cast member too until I said, wait, Mark isn't on the show anymore.
That's funny. But yeah, and I do want to mention Kara's TikTok, because I think it gave a lot of context to the season, and we had heard some rumors from um like the spoiled people or whatever, just saying that there was a rumor that Derek Chavez did put down in his live. There was a rumor that Cara left the house for a few days. That was not true.
Yeah.
Derek said that that was not true. Cara did mention on her TikTok that she talked to a psychologist, and also that she had a security officer following her around. so that Laurel wouldn't to tell Laurel to leave if she tried to get close to her. Which again, why the Laurel being to that level of a bully is not okay.
No.
And we also she didn't mention much, but she did mention that Laurel was kind of weaponizing her past relationships and stuff with very serious topics like domestic violence were mentioned. And I think that that's absolutely disgusting, and
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
not something that should ever be used as a weapon against somebody in an
No question.
argument. Do you have any more thoughts on that situation?
You said it perfectly.
Just
So, ready to get into eliminations?
yeah, I think so. I was trying to think if I had any more
Oh.
thoughts, but I think we pretty much covered it. Disgusting behavior from Laurel and Team Cara and Michelle.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so moving in, like we've kind of already hinted at, it's no surprise that we're gonna get Era 1 against Era 2 here.
Mhm.
Um, Era 4 decides to send Emily and Nehemiah in to face CT and to face Tina.
Mhm.
And like I talked about early on at the beginning of the show, we get an elimination that simply requires you to remove 100 nails from one board and hammer in 100 nails into another board across the elimination arena. Excuse me.
Yeah. Oh, you're
So
good.
therefore, no, this isn't really something that you can practice. I mean, you could be Boston Robin, be a carpenter or something, and have a slight advantage, but this isn't a skill that people go, oh, let's just start hammering nails into plywood right before I go on the challenge, or nothing that you can develop at the gym. So therefore, this is a wide open game for whoever can figure out the best technique.
Yeah, and I think that, and we've spoken about this, it's a lot of times the equalizers, the greatest people in this game sometimes are good at the stupid shit.
Yeah,
And I think this is
bananas
a
is the key of that.
yeah, absolutely. And Laurel, I think, is also very good at stupid shit. But um yeah, it was a very random elimination, but I think that this was right up Tina's alley, and we saw in that first elimination how she just took the hammer and magically flung them all off like 100 at a time. So, I don't know, what did you think about Tina's performance?
I thought it was impressive that she would think of that. Well done to Tina. I was like right away thought, okay, how hard can it be to just use the back of the hammer like I think it was intended to be, and as Emily did,
Yeah.
and pull out 100 nails. I mean, it's not like you're doing 10,000. 100 will take you no more than a couple minutes. So I was impressed to see Tina take a risk and do something that was a little out of the ordinary, and in the end, use that to her advantage and give Emily Schramm her first elimination loss of her challenge career. That's not
Yeah.
something that most people can say.
And I also think it's interesting because I do think that it wasn't like a big risk because again, if it didn't work out, she could have just gone right back to like doing it the normal way. She wouldn't lose that much time. But um I think
But even
she
that, if you're behind by 30 seconds,
it makes a difference.
it's still a
Absolutely.
big difference in such an equal challenge.
But I think that cuz we saw Emily try to do that and we saw CT and Nehemiah also try to do that, which didn't work. So it makes me think that Tina, like she said, she does a lot of home renovation
Yeah,
projects. I think she just had this I think there was a maneuver or a way that she did it that made it so that they would all come out because when people try to do that later on, it didn't work.
she could have known what angle to do it at or something.
Yeah, I think it wasn't as simple as just like hitting them at the top. I think
Yeah,
there was a angle or swing to it that definitely made it work out. But yeah, she
pushing back
absolutely
far enough on the nails so they shove out instead of just
yeah.
getting stuck.
Yeah, I don't know. I watched that over again because I was like, what is she doing that they're just all coming off? and we saw people try to do it later and it didn't work out for them.
Yeah,
So I don't know. I was really, really impressed with Tina and her performance. I think it wasn't just her skills with a hammer. I think it was also like she came in shape, and she says she trained very hard for this season. And you can also see it like in her body. Like she's looking more muscular than what we saw her on All Stars.
yeah,
And I think it was a combination of, again, having some skills and also coming in with that endurance as well.
absolutely.
And then we see
I
CT
mean,
and
that's
Nehemiah.
even a bigger thing too, just to point out that even though we're seeing one having some challenges and get into elimination all the time, looking at the fact that they have like two females left on the women's side,
Mm-hmm.
Tina and Rachel are in perfect shape coming in and are just as big of a threats to win this as anybody else. Although with dwindling numbers, they may have to go into elimination more frequently in order to get there.
Yeah, and I think at this point, obviously CT was not a weak link. I'm not trying to get to that. But I
Yeah,
think at this point, that core four is like, obviously CT is very good at the dailies, but I think CT has a very loud voice. And I think like so does Tina. Like we saw them arguing today. And I think when you have more let's say workhorses like a Darrell, a Rachel, and a Derek. I think when you have, like, I could see Era One doing better in dailies, not because of CT being gone, but just it's one less loud voice
true.
in that group. So I think instead of them arguing and not being able to agree on a strategy, if you have the loud voice of Tina and people just willing to do work, I think that's definitely going to be something that can benefit them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think the same thing would have been if Tina would have gone home and CT would have stayed. I think those two are just, they both want to have a say in things. They both are very smart, but I think that having less, like, there's too many chefs in the kitchen per
Yeah,
se, not enough cooks. But
that's for
yeah.
sure.
What did
And
you think of,
it's hard to
sorry.
not run into that problem when you one and you have people who have been doing this for 20 years at this point.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely. And that was another thing that surprised me about Era 4 or Era 1 was that, like, they, well, I guess they still have Brad. I forgot about Brad.
Yeah,
Yeah, Brad, I don't think Brad is locked in because we've seen Brad locked in when he was on um Final Reckoning and Vendettas and just other seasons, and also All Stars 3 we saw Brad pretty much win every single daily, but then now we saw Brad in All Stars 4 not doing so hot, and I think on season 40 right now it's, I don't think he's locked in, and I think
and
Brad,
he lost on season 39 for the
yeah,
one ten,
I
five
think
minutes he was
he,
there.
yeah, and he lost bad,
Yeah,
it wasn't close between him and Kyland. So I don't know. I think Brad can be very dangerous, but I also think that he's not quite like in the mind space of being locked into the game. So I don't know. I think Era 1 is probably still going to struggle, but I could see with less loud voices. But I guess Brad is also a loud voice. We saw him
yeah.
saying he knows how to work the rudder, and he did not know how to work the rudder. So,
Now, just with you mentioning it isn't close, this is not really on topic for the elimination, but
mhm.
it's just something that popped in my mind. Um, you mentioned it wasn't close in the elimination and with Kyland and Brad, and we saw Kyland do so well in eliminations against champions before, and we've seen him have a great season on 39 in
Mhm.
dailies and in the house, and we're seeing Kyland have a good season so far. Has he already passed Josh and Fessy as the best Big Brother male in this game?
Um
I think there's a good case to be made.
I think that there's a good case to be made because I think that he doesn't have a glaring weakness,
Yeah.
but I think that Fessy has, as much as I don't like Fessy, I think we haven't seen Kyland make a final, and we've seen Fessy make every final except Ride or Dies and Spies, Lies, and Allies because or was it? Yeah, it was Spies,
Spies, Lies, and
Allies
Allies, he got
because he
thrown out.
got removed.
And
So we've
then
only ever seen
Ryder
him
dies. He's
with Mariah.
gets
They
eliminated with
lost
Mariah.
to
That's right.
Bananas. Yep. So we've never seen Fessy individually lose an elimination, and we've have seen Kyland lose an individual elimination, which it was a janky elimination. It was a balance the ball and do Sudokus or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think that there's a good case to be made, but I do think that right now I think I would have to see him make a final,
Okay.
and then I would say that he is better than Pessy as the Big Brother ranks go. But yeah, I mean, we see CT lose to Nehemiah, which obviously nobody wants to see CT go.
No.
But I mean, we did see CT was not in the best shape, I guess,
Yeah.
that he has been on other seasons. And I mean, right now I saw a picture of him recently on his Instagram and he looks like he's definitely slimmed out. So we'll have to see if he comes back and decides to, and see if he goes back to being the Spies, Lies, and Allies and War of the Worlds 2 and Double Agents CT that we
Yeah.
have seen in the recent seasons.
And not
But
Total Madness or 40.
yeah, exactly. I think that's what it takes for him. I think he needs to do kind of like bad on one season for him to like come back and really lock in and be able to be the best at everything, I guess.
Yeah. That's a good point. Also, this might be unpopular in the broader community, but I mean, and kind of, I remember like that scene we got right after the last Edge of Extinction in Survivor 40, and it was kind of like this end of an era. I
Mhm.
wouldn't be all that disappointed if a lot of these legends that we all love, if this is the last girl all at once together, and we really get a new generation of this show, kind of where the namesake of this podcast comes from.
Yeah, I think I think it depends on, like you said, a lot of those new faces. Like I think Air One is like I feel like CT he I feel like he would do better on something like All Stars.
Yeah.
And that's another reason that I like All Stars is because we have the people that built the show, but I think the flagship is more of we want to see the newer faces. We want to
Yeah.
see I want to see like I want to see who the new CT is going to be. I want to see who the new Bananas is going to be. And I think it in era one's like losing streak and how they're not doing as well compared to the other eras just kind of speaks for itself, because I do think era 2, like having someone like Cara is still going to come in if she comes in on 41, let's say, she's still going to be a very good competitor. She's
Yep.
still in her prime. But let's say someone like, I don't know, Anissa or Brad or whoever may just do better on an all-star season. And I think that if the OGs are able to kind of obviously like keep up and also like do well, I would love to see them on the flagship, but I feel like it's better to see some of the OGs, some of the older people compete with people from their eras, you know?
True.
Because I mean, we see like Bananas. He is obviously like 45 or something like that.
Yeah.
And he's still coming in, like he made the USA 2 final. He made the Ride or Dies final. He's still pretty good. You
Yeah.
know, we see Kara coming in, still dominating dailies, everything. She's still good. But then there's some people that are like, I feel like their time has passed on the flagship.
I agree. All right. So we mentioned moving on with CT being eliminated. Now
Mhm.
we have to, before we wrap up, talk about the decisions that were made by Nehemiah and by Tina in terms of who would actually become targets next week.
Yeah, I mean, for era one, Rachel was the only option.
Yeah,
So
that's
it was Rachel.
self-explanatory. And that's what
And
I think is going to be difficult for Rachel now is that if it's her winning, she has to put Tina. If it's Tina winning, she has to put her. I want to know what would have happened if Tina lost. And it's like,
mhm,
does Rachel, yes, Rachel becomes the target, easy. What if Rachel wins next week? Does she have to put herself again?
I think she does.
I would imagine so, but haven't got, we don't know for sure. So,
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine so too, but like you said, I don't know, we don't know what would happen because, and the only reason I would imagine that would be the case is because what if Era 1 lost the daily?
yeah,
They're automatically into elimination.
that's
So
it.
it's not like they're gonna be like, oh, actually, since you already won, then we're gonna have
At
to
some
make
point, we're going to find out because there will eventually come a time when someone has to be the last player of their gender on their era
Yeah, and
before the
we'll have to
final.
see how
Unless
what
somehow, and I mean, I don't think this would be very fair, but if it does happen, credit to Tina or Rachel where it's due. If TJ just says you made the final, you're the last one on your era.
yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah,
But we see Rachel being the target for her era, and then we also see Brad
yep,
volunteer. He did volunteer, correct?
yep.
Yeah. What did you think of Brad volunteering? Because like I mentioned, I'm not a big fan of the volunteer.
Yeah, I'm not either. I think with era one, their numbers are starting to dwindle. They kind of, it's the way they play the game compared to some of the newer eras.
Mhm.
They didn't come into this game in an era with votes and blindsides. And at that point, it wouldn't surprise me if era one just decides to, well, they're going to have to equally move it for the women. But if they decide to just equally volunteer for the men too.
Yeah, and I also think that
And we saw CT do the same thing last week. So
I think that with Era
nothing's
1,
changed.
there's almost like a respect
Yeah.
for each other that they have, that obviously the other eras respect each other because we see Era 3 kind of taking turns, but I think that they have like a different type of respect for each other that all the men, like I think especially with the men I'm seeing, all of those guys are friends. Like we
Yeah.
saw Mark,
And
Derek, Brad, they're all
and I
very
think
good
that
friends.
comes down to in those seasons, they at the beginning they didn't have to try to eliminate each other.
Mhm.
They were just there. So they've all formed these relationships that don't, kind of going back to what we saw with the big fight this week, that don't come down to animosity of you threw me in 10 seasons ago, the way
Mhm.
we see with some of the newer players.
Yeah, and I think some of the newer players, like they have respect for each other, but they're also like, I'm not gonna volunteer unless I get picked. You
Exactly.
know, and I think that Brad and we saw CT last week and everything just kind of saw it as, you know what? They've all been into elimination, like somebody else's turn to step up.
Yep.
So I think that's what it was. It's the
Excuse me.
fact that they respect Darrell, they respect Derek, to the fact that they've already been in. Derek's been in twice. You know, like that would be horrible to nominate him again after he's
Yeah.
already been in twice. So I get that. But with era 2, we see Tina picks Laurel and Nehemiah picks bananas. So we have the same targets that we had a couple weeks ago.
Yep.
And what do you
I'm gonna
think about that?
I'm gonna save my comments here till we get to era four because I have something I want to say, but I want to link them
Okay.
if you don't
I will
mind.
say, yeah, no, you're fine. I will say that
I'm curious
it
to know what you think, though.
it's surprising to me how well protected Derek and Ryan are. That
Yeah,
is not something that I expected because I like Derek and Ryan, the last time we saw him some was All Stars 4, but they don't know a lot of this cast, you know?
yeah.
So I was
Especially
like,
within their own era, that surprises me. It doesn't surprise me that Derek's well protected across the game, because I mean, he's been Avery's roommate. He worked in a bar before Real World Cancun with John A, and they both got cast together.
Mm-hmm.
He's, I think, lives in the same neighborhood as Olivia, and you see the two of them out partying together all the time. So he
Yeah.
clearly has friends across the game, but how well Derek's doing even within his own team, I'm finding a bit surprising.
Yeah. But I mean, to me, it was like, I guess we saw Derek and I'm guessing Derek and Olivia, they obviously knew each other before 40, but I think 40 was when they built like a stronger friendship,
Yeah,
and obviously they live very close to each other. So I don't know, it was interesting to me to see how well connected they were
yeah,
both, and how it wasn't even a question for Nehemiah to nominate
agreed.
Bananas
And then
or
it
Derek.
hasn't came up on the show, but as per you mentioning Ryan, and I think that's a good point. This is what I'd almost call looking at the past 2 years, and I went through some of the cast guest lists recently. This
Mhm.
is almost, I think, with Ryan, the Challenge Mania effect is that he's done so many live events with so many different players of so many different eras out meeting fans in every corner of the country
Mhm.
that it's really playing to his advantage of having relationships across this whole house, whether it be with Derek on his team, who he was already close with, or with Devin and Tori, or with Michelle and Olivia. He's basically met everybody coming in recently, even though he hasn't done the main show recently.
Yeah, and I think this, because I was thinking before this season when the cast list came out, like I thought that Mark Long, and I think I said this during our cast reel, that he was out of everybody. If I had to pick a male to make the final, I was like, it's gonna be Mark, because
Yeah,
nobody wants to vote in Mark. Everybody loves him. He's always doing Challenge Mania events, blah blah blah. But I think it's interesting that it's your own, or it's not necessarily, it's not a house vote that votes you in. So it's
yeah,
like it could be one, like, it could be the unluck you could just get unlucky, and the one person that you aren't very well connected with is gonna select you out of your era to go in.
that's very true.
But, yeah, and then we saw John A, um, she didn't wanna nominate herself, but it didn't end up mattering because she got nominated, which I think it was stupid of her to say, "I'm not gonna nominate myself, it's too risky," when it's like, you just made them wanna nominate you more, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, it's not something good to speculate on and then change your mind. I would
And
say if I was John A,
she
just
said
don't
it
say anything at all.
yeah, she said it right before they nominated her. I'm like, "Just be quiet, and then maybe they won't nominate you," but you're like, I can't do it, it's too risky." Well, they're gonna wanna
They're
pick
gonna
you.
do it anyway. Exactly.
But, yeah, now we have the Era 4 targets, which remind me were Jenny
Yeah,
and Kylan.
that's right.
Yeah. Oh, no, Josh.
Oh yeah,
Josh
Josh.
nominated
Josh
himself.
finally is nominated himself. So what I wanted to touch on, and this has to do with linking Era 2 and Era 4. We notice Loyal gets selected for Era 2,
Mhm.
and we notice Nehemiah, unlike the other eras, not even ask for volunteers. And I think if he did ask for volunteers, I mean, we already brought it up in this episode, all eyes would have been on Michelle,
Oh, yeah.
simply because she's never been a target yet.
Yeah, but
Um,
I think,
he just selected Jenny. It makes me wonder with Nehemiah just selecting Jenny, is Nehemiah playing the same game as Loyal was and trying to get rid of problematic people on his team, i.e., Loyal herself?
mhm, and then
Because
picking
if you want to get rid of Loyal, you put her into an elimination against Jenny.
absolutely. I think that's a very good point, and that's not something I thought about. My thought process initially watching it and seeing why, um, like Kylan and Jenny or whatever keep getting nominated so much is more of, they see that they're big threats, and like when you see Jenny, like even that pool party, we saw how big those girls' muscles are. You know,
Yeah,
like I am terrified of her. And I think that my thought process was more as, let's get rid of the most muscular, strongest female in their team, because I don't know. But so yeah, we see that they are, I don't know, I think Michelle is just kind of at an understanding where she's not gonna nominate herself because she doesn't need to.
Right.
They don't like she's never said, "Oh, it's gonna be me next. I'm gonna do it next," like Josh was, and I'm glad that he actually did it this time
Yeah,
because I think he regretted not doing it that last time because they ended up winning the challenge. So then it's like, then you would have been good for a few more weeks, you know?
exactly.
And I think at the end
And
of the
now
day,
he might not be, so we'll see.
we have to remember that it's also like just because you're nominating yourself, it doesn't mean that that person's gonna want to choose you.
Yep.
And obviously, it would stir up more drama to not choose that person. But I think that
As
there's
as we
you
get
don't.
closer to the end of the game, and even the midway point of the game that we'll probably be coming up on in a few weeks, it'll
Mhm.
probably move to that where people will even stop asking if anybody wants to do it because
Mhm.
they'll have their own idea of who they want in the game and who they want out of the game for their own game and not for anybody else's.
Yeah, and I mean, if it was me and somebody had nominated me, even if we didn't have any beef or anything like that, if the next time if I won an elimination, I'm gonna nominate you back
Yeah, for sure.
because if I didn't volunteer or anything, you're gonna get that back. So I don't know. It's interesting. But do you have any more thoughts of this episode?
No, that's really about it that I had. Anything you want to add before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I do again want to reiterate the big deal of this, and I want to say that my heart really hurt watching the way
Yeah,
that Laurel was screaming to Cara, the way that she was treating Michelle, and just kind of reiterate to everybody listening that it's never okay to weaponize somebody's past with something like abuse. And
absolutely.
I think that this is something that we need to we need to call out in a
Yep.
way, just talk about it like we're talking about it right now because the show is protecting Laurel. We can see that they didn't like it was worse than what they showed. And I just want to say, everybody send love to Cara, send love to Michelle because they going through that is not easy. And I'm really happy that Cara spoke out and put the truth out there from the episode.
Yeah, same as me. Can't agree more. So well said. Um, and absolutely same thing. I'll I know you and I are definitely two that are very positive towards our favorite contestants,
Mhm.
and Michelle and Cara are definitely two of them. And I encourage everyone, same thing, to let all players know, but especially when someone is the victim of what we saw, to let them know as a fan base that we really appreciate them being on television, and
Mhm.
what one contestant decided to do, being loyal, was totally uncalled for. And frankly, I'm not even sure if production handled that as well as they should.
Yeah, and I like we have not seen from her stories. She was just answering DMs of people just talking about how she didn't do anything wrong or whatever. She's not taking any accountability. And by
I
no
mean,
means is
I
this
haven't once interacted with Loyal online and she blocked me, so I have no idea what she posted on her stories. So please spill the tea to me. This is all news.
she
I literally think she probably blocked me for posting a pro Michelle comment on the challenge page in like during Ride or Dies.
so she had posted um so it was like kind of a text message of a DM that
Hmm.
she had received saying since day one you're the GOAT.
Oh god.
Keep speaking your mind and choosing the energy that fits you. Just somebody, a Laurel fan, and she said, "And I love you. You see it exactly." And then another, "We love you, Laurel. Keep being you. Love you all." And then this is a big message that she said. She said, "Thank you for everybody who sees me and the appreciation for being real and not playing anything up for the cameras ever. So many perspectives on one soul situation, and everyone can take something different from it. Life isn't always beautiful, complicated. Relationships bring up real issues, especially when there is a long-standing history that includes a lot of deep pain that most people will never know, but me and Cara. I don't think reality TV editing could ever grasp the depths of where the argument came from because it was more than the game. For those who feel like they can't stick up for themselves, you can keep pushing. For those in compromised home situations, I hope you get out and find safety. For those who feel pain from the past, I hope you find relief. from it and are able to drop that burden and wait. So we see her kind of saying, trying to be positive about it, but
Yeah. I
to
mean,
me,
she can have her perspective. It's whether there was more that we didn't see or not. There's what we did see in front of the cameras both last night and in All Stars 4,
mhm,
and neither
and what we
one
heard
was,
from Cara,
yeah,
who is the victim in the
and
situation.
neither one was acceptable by at least my perspective as a fan. And I
Mhm.
think production should be wise to look for that in the future.
Yeah, and by saying holding people accountable, that does not mean obviously sending hate to people or anything like that. I just think it's important for us fans, like in the challenge comments section or whatever, talking about it on podcasts, to just kind of say, like, that was really disgusting and
Yeah.
that's not something that's okay. But other than that, I don't have any thoughts. I am excited to see the next episode. We see kind of Bananas and Devin drama stirring up. We can kind of see
Again.
from the preview. And then we hear Banana say something like, I hope he's not using you for the game. So I'm assuming he's talking to Michelle when he's saying that, but I don't know.
But if he is, we clearly see that that's not the case, because
Absolutely.
congratulations
It's
to
been
Michelle and
months.
Devin. They just posted it was their fourth month of being a couple the other
Hmm.
day.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously we know that's not true, but we see kind of a sneak peek of that. So I wonder what is happening between Devin and Bananas, because we know that they were good after Ryder dies and they were good this
I
season.
wonder if they were good after Rider dies, or if they just had to be based on the format of that season, with the fact that Banana's partner was Nani Gonzalez, who is therefore Casey's fiance, well, now fiance, then girlfriend, who
Yeah.
is
Vacation
tied,
Alliance. Yep.
exactly, tied to Tori, tied to Devin, tied to Fessy, so on and so forth.
Yeah. But do you have any more thoughts, or are we good to
No,
wrap up?
good to wrap up. Thanks everyone for tuning in again. Can't wait this week. Now that we're back on schedule, I'll be doing more regular social media content. So can't wait to see some of you interactions with you guys as you're listening. Always feel free to give us feedback, and have a great rest of your week. We'll see you next week.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for listening, and tune back in next week for the new episode.